Habitat, Defiance, and Democracy. As a mission-driven organization, Trinity publishes each book with great intentionality. We're proud of them all, but it's rare that a book has true urgency, like Dear America does. It is a critical collection for the times in which we live, and a call to action in light of such urgent challenges facing us today. Personally, Dear America has played a significant role in my life since I started working with Terrain on it more than a year ago. I like to think of myself as a politically and culturally aware person. I keep up with the news and try to stay informed about everything going on in the country, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I still find myself growing complacent, and it's the personal experiences and raw emotion, like those captured in the Dear America collection, that bring me back to the human impact behind the headlines and break me out of the information overload stupor and into action. And that's why I find myself turning to these pieces again and again. In the Dear America Town Hall events, we explore different themes, including the natural environment, violence and injustice, and activism and protest. Tonight's topic is the geography of hope, writing toward a better tomorrow, in which we'll turn our attention towards the future despite the unprecedented political division, social unrest, and pressing emergencies at the forefront of all of our minds today. There's so much writing on the November election, now only weeks away, and it's a good time to remind ourselves not only what's at stake, but also all that can be gained when we come together with a unified vision and put words to power in the voting booth and beyond. The event tonight is also streamed live on Facebook and archived there and on the Trinity University Press webpage. The print and ebook is available at your favorite neighborhood or online retailer, but it is also available at a special price just for you at dearamericabook.org. In light of the current times, please consider buying additional copies to share with your family, neighbors, colleagues, or even as a donation to your local library. This is a book we all need to read right now. To me, it helps us calmly, but honestly assess where we are and have hope for the future, alone and together. It is now my pleasure to introduce Derek Sheffield, one of the 3 editors of Dear America, along with Simmons Buntin and Elizabeth Dodd. He is also the poetry editor for Terrain.org and an award-winning and prolific poet in his own right, and professor of English at Wenatchee Valley College in Central Washington. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Stephanie, for those beautiful and heartfelt words. It's an honor for me to host tonight's town hall with these amazing writers and citizens. On behalf of myself and my wonderful co-editors, Simmons Buntin and Elizabeth Dodd, welcome. When I articulated the theme for tonight's town hall 6 months ago, Geography of Hope, writing toward a better tomorrow, I had no idea of the exact events that would occur to conspire to make me personally today, now, need it. Before we begin, I'll just say a bit more about the book, Dear America, Letters of Hope, Habitat, Defiance, and Democracy. Emphasis on the hope tonight. This is such a powerful, diverse, and necessary collection of poetry, prose, and artwork. Of the 130 contributions 50 were not previously published. These are letters that do not appear in the terrain.org online series. So even if you read terrain.org regularly, you'll want a copy of this book. If you go to dearamericabook.org, that's Dear America Book, all one word, you can get 20% off each copy you purchase. You can be like Ana Spagna, the great poet who has a designated birthday gift now and just buys a copy for every birthday that comes up. And there's even more good reasons to do so in the fact that all the royalties are going to three important nonprofits: the Union of Concerned Scientists, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and the American Civil Liberties Union. And this portal, dearamericabook.org, is the way to maximize the funds going to those three stalwart organizations. Or of course, you can go through the local bookseller of your choice, perhaps supporting your local bookstore. Meanwhile, the online series continues. We've published 195 letters at terrain.org, including most recently one from Jolie Cates, who, as she bicycles from Moscow, Idaho to Pullman, Washington on her commute, ponders how we can hold space for the landscape losses we perceive daily, how to imagine fiercely within the terrain of ongoing uncertainty. Indeed. We invite you to visit terrain.org after tonight's town hall to read Jolie's wonderful letter. While you are there, please take note of our website's new design and a couple of recent additions. teachterrain.org, which is a robust resource devoted to helping teachers and community groups use terrain.org as a place-based, ad-free, no-cost resource for education and discussion, and our recently articulated statement on racial justice with our commitments to action. And you will see too, while you were poking around, that we are opening in 5 days for general submissions, September 28th through now submittable. Now it's time to turn to our readers. We'll go in this order: Ana Maria, Chris, Victoria, Jeffrey, and David. And I will introduce each one just before they read. Audience, if a question comes to mind and as you listen, please send it through the Q&A button. Then we will have about 15 minutes or so for that conversation at the end. It's such a pleasure for me to introduce Ana Maria Spagna, who is a good friend and a neighbor in her rural special home, where she is not now, but she will be back to at some point. She is the author of several books, and I would have one here to show you one or two, except they're on campus, where I am always loaning them to students. Back when we were all working, on campus and seeing each other in shared air. But those books include Reclaimers, stories of elder women reclaiming sacred land and water, Test Ride on the Sunnyland Bus, winner of the River Teeth Literary Nonfiction Prize, and 3 essay collections. She teaches in the low residency MFA programs at Antioch University, Los Angeles, and Western Colorado University, and lives in the North Cascades. And I will just tell you, Ana Maria is one of the writers that I'm going to be turning to a lot lately, I think, in the next few months. Others like Robin Wall Kimmer and Scott Russell Sanders, I feel such a deep and beautiful generosity in her writing. And I invite you to listen for that tonight. Ana Maria.
Well, thank you, Derek. What a generous introduction. And thank you and Simmons and Elizabeth and Trinity University Press and terrain.org for this amazing book. I've been reading it with students this semester and with friends, and it never fails to offer inspiration and challenge and solace. And it's an honor to be among all the writers in the collection and to spend time with their work. This particular essay I wrote within a week of the election in 2016, and it still resonates. And it's also a tribute to the singer, the great soul singer, Sharon Jones. And I invite you after the reading to please, if you don't know her work, please listen to her music, and if possible, check out a video of her performing. It's quite amazing. So with that, I will read, "This land is still our land." Dear America, even before her recent too damned early death from cancer, I couldn't listen to Sharon Jones's version of "This land is your land" without weeping. Tonight, I'm listening over and over. True, I am a sucker for her voice on any song. Add horns and a funky bass line from the Dap Kings, and I will surely swoon. But this song, this is the song I sang sitting cross-legged on the carpet at Jefferson Elementary School and around beach campfires at San Clemente with my parents' friends. This was the 70s, after all. And from the too hot way back of the station wagon on family road trips from California to St. Louis when we stopped at every national park. The song needles into me and betrays one of my deepest secrets. I am fiercely patriotic. The road trips did it to me, yes, the land itself, your land, my land, stretching out mountains and prairies and deserts and oceans. Natural beauty moved me always. My allegiance could easily have affixed to the earth in general, or more specifically to the non-human world, but it didn't, because of what I read. In high school, I took a combination American history and literature class that started with one question: what is truth? A question that shook my very Catholic heart. How could there be more than one? You mean people could debate such things? From there, we were off to the Federalist Papers, the Scarlet Letter, Emerson and Thoreau, the usual suspects, but also Frederick Douglass, Willa Cather, The Jungle, and The Grapes of Wrath, and I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. America wasn't just land, it turned out. It was ideas, and we always seemed to be making the ideas work better. That year, I discovered Simon and Garfunkel's America and played it over and over. So we're all searching for America. So we're all empty and aching, at least we're in it together. Despite the many flaws of our leaders. Our babysitter screeched into the driveway to holler that Nixon had erased the goddamn tapes. A college professor announced in class that Reagan had sold arms to Iran to fund Nicaraguan rebels, and we figured at first that he had truly lost his mind. Clinton lied about Monica, Bush lied about WMDs. Power, Corruption, and Lies wasn't just an album title. There were always good reasons to stay vigilant, but not to give up. When, 2 decades later, I went looking for stories to write, I met heroes and sheroes of the civil rights movement who told stories of their efforts and the real oppression they faced, arrests, beatings, lost jobs, with a shrug. It was no big deal, they said. It was the right thing to do. Later, Pauline Estevez, a Timbisha Shoshone elder in Death Valley, described to me how she'd been forcibly displaced as a child, had her adobe house hosed away as an adult, and still lived to be the lead negotiator when her tribe reclaimed its homeland from the United States government. For me to give in to nonchalance draped in bitterness, to choose, say, not to vote, would betray these people and so many others. The morning after the election, I went running. Snow had crept low on the mountains, weak early winter sun shone on the river, Still yellow cottonwood leaves littered the gravel road, waiting to be churned to bits under tires. Neighbors passed in their supersized American trucks, and I could hardly wave. Even though I always wave, every single morning, I did not want to wave. I waved anyway. Sharon Jones and I come from wildly different worlds, the far ends of that ribbon of a highway, you might say. A Black woman, born in South Carolina, she moved north with hopes of making it as a singer, but was told she was too Black, too short, too fat to ever make it in show business. She worked as a corrections officer at Rikers Prison before getting her break, with her own band and her own label at the age of 40. Me, I'm a white lesbian, a woods-dwelling former laborer, originally from Riverside, California. Until this week, when I finally looked it up online, I never knew why Sharon Jones names Riverside in This Land Is Your Land, because it's the hometown of Dap King's bassist, Gabe Roth. A suburb in the vast crowded space between the Pacific and the Mojave, Riverside is the kind of place that many people disparage. I've done it myself. A regular sun-soaked suburb, neither shiny nor shoddy, crisscrossed by freeways, lined with palm trees, inhabited by workers waiting outside Home Depot for a day job, and old women pushing hand carts to the food bank, kids on playgrounds, moms in traffic, my family, my friends, my land, your land. Every time Sharon Jones belts out from Riverside, California, I am moved the way surely some voters feel when a candidate speaks directly to them. But that's not all. It's not the shout out, not the voice, not even the nostalgia that gets to me the most. It's the lyrics themselves, especially in the final two verses with Woody Guthrie's words tweaked only slightly. In the third verse, Sharon sings, "As I was walking, now they tried to stop me. They put up a sign that said, private property. Well, on the back side, you know, it said nothing. So it must be that side was made for you and me." Hear that, Ammon Bundy? And in the fourth verse, even more rarely sung or heard, one bright sunny morning in the shadow of the steeple down by the welfare office, I saw my people. As they stood hungry, I stood wondering if this land is made for you and me. Not a proclamation, but a question, and a damned good one. I only saw her live once, shaking and stomping and shimmering across the high stage. The word dancing does not begin to describe this. She was not far from death then, and carried deep weariness tucked in a tight sequin dress. But it didn't stop her. She'd been told before she could never make it, but she made it anyway. She made it all the way until this week. What we have in this country, in our country, is tenuous, every last bit of it. The land is threatened. Non-human species are threatened. Ditto for our ideas. And then there are people, all of us, especially the vulnerable. Am I worried? I am. But I am not giving up. I am holding fast to this one word, patriotic. My word, your word. I refuse to cede it, even if I don't know yet how to protect all it stands for. For now, all I know how to do is to get up in the morning and go running by the river and wave at my neighbors. Then come home and turn Sharon up loud, again and again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ana Maria. I can tell you that I've thought of your letter many times since I first read it, and there have been many times when I really did not feel like waving, but I did. So thank you for that. Just a reminder that to go ahead and use the Q&A feature to post questions for consideration following the reading. Next up, we have Chris Dombrowski, who writes, teaches, and plies the rivers of Western Montana. His nonfiction debut, Body of Water, was published to enthusiastic reviews in 2016. He is also the author of 3 acclaimed poetry collections, most recently Ragged Anthem, which has earned high praise from many fellow poets. And it looks like this. It's a beautiful book. You should get it. Jericho Brown, Melissa Kwasny, and Todd Davis have all weighed in to say this is a brilliant collection, you should buy it, in their different ways. Now listen, Chris earns a living as a fly fishing guide, and as it happens, he's still on the river today. So he's going to beam in through his cell phone.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Dombrowski. I'm reading to you tonight from Missoula, Montana. And I just want to say how honored I am to be taking part in this celebration with you all, and how grateful I am to be part of this amazing anthology, Dear America. Thank you, Simmons and Elizabeth and Derek, my dear friend, for including my poem in here. I'm going to start this evening with a poem by Miriam Marty Clark, What You'd Want to Remember. Now, daylight spent, darkness falls before supper, votives flickering down the long table, and voices, someone leaning in to hear, or back to laugh or consider, someone reaching over to touch, tentative, kind, not out but over, across the dark. It wasn't any one thing you'd want to remember. Later, a story, a gesture, a beautiful face, animated in the candlelight, the glasses refilled again and again, or how late you stayed, talking into that autumn night. You'd need an old word for what it was, our commonweal. You'd need that when you thought back. This next poem is a poem that I wrote. It's called To the First of Getting Longer Days. I felt unsettled driving northeast in the dark, up what the Salish called the road to the buffalo, long before my tribe struck its camp of cul-de-sacs, though some still speak the road's name in Salish, further evidencing my aforementioned sense of self-importance, inherited from forefathers who also wanted more and newer things, such as cars without fender dents that don't burn motor oil at a slow, if determined, pace, such that checking the levels seems necessary every few hundred furlongs. But then again, I own it, even if the gasket job cost roughly what the car was worth, and even if I'd put repairs on a Visa. This line of thought continuing as Dawn stretched her blue shawl over the scapegoat, which is to say, I felt the guilt privilege affords, and justly, since I was driving with my setter to hunt pheasants, chiefly a sporting endeavor, so removed from horseback and buffalo jumps. The NPR station fizzled into white noise, and 20 miles from the next gas station, I had to relieve myself. What a flock of warblers was doing so close to the mountains on the winter solstice, and chattering in the dark as the falling snow melted flake by flake into my forehead, not even the most learned ornithologist could have determined. But they called assuredly from a slope of sage, as though they had always been calling, and I finished pissing, though perhaps I had always been pissing, and men, shouldering full quivers, rode up the road, one of them glancing to regard not traveler, but song, as the light arrived, or kept arriving, as it will. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. That was lovely. Victoria Chang's poetry books include Obit. Looks like this. It's a beautiful book, high production value. You just kind of want to hold it. There's a lot of pictures of Victoria on the front. Barbie Chang, The Boss, Salvinia Molesta, and Circle. Her children's books include Is Mommy, which was illustrated by Marla Frazee, and Love, Love, a middle grade novel. She lives in Los Angeles and serves as the program chair of Antioch's low residency MFA program. I can tell you that a couple of years ago, I was thinking that it would be marvelous to have the dead man's letter to America. So I queried Marvin Bell about that. And as I queried him, I sent him a few poems that had been amazingly written in response to the prompt, Letter to America. And one of those poems was Victoria's. And so Marvin, it turns out, I guess the dead man could not rouse himself for a Letter to America. But I don't know if I ever told Victoria this, but Marvin emailed me back and said that poem by Victoria Chang is the real deal. So here's the real deal.
Hi, my name is Victoria Chang. Thank you so much for inviting me to this reading. It's such a pleasure to read with my colleague, Antioch colleague, Ana Maria Spagna, and so nice to be here. Thank you, Derek, and reading with everyone else. I'm going to read two poems. I'm going to start with a poem. It was really hard to pick one. I was waffling, and I just changed my mind seconds beforehand. But I'm going to read this poem called Duplex by Jericho Brown, and it's a really interesting poem. And a duplex is a form that Jericho invented, and he says some really interesting things that I'm going to read about this particular form and forms in general. He says, quote, "I write in forms because formal work helps to push me towards saying what I couldn't imagine I would say in poems," unquote. And it kind of reminded me of, as someone who loves writing in forms, Terrence Hayes also describes writing in form as kind of like a bird within a cage. And that really that's how I feel when I use forms as well. So the duplex is 14 lines. It's separated in couplets, which are 2 lines. The last line or words of each couplet becomes the first line or part of the first line of the following couplet. And the very first line of the poem should also be present as the last line of the poem. So anyway, this is Jericho Brown's Duplex. I still believe in God. What else keeps me from slaughter? Who else holds the butcher's hand? Sweet slaughter. Though I'd pray, give me butcher's hands. Matthew baked me cakes as if I could be saved. He baked spice cake, humming as if we were safe, as if this weren't the land of milk and money. We can't survive this nation of white money, says the black man as his excuse for malice. What black man needs an excuse for malice? Why mask the salt no sugar is that sweet. My pressure's high, no sugar could make me sweet. If he came back today, if he forgave me. Since he won't come back, won't forgive me, I believe in God. Who else would keep me? And just to keep quoting Jericho, because these quotes are so great, he also said on the form of a duplex that he loves it because something about its repetition and its couplets made me feel like it was a house with two addresses. That's beautiful. I'm going to read a poem from my book Obit, and it's in this anthology, and it actually ended up being the last poem in my book. And Derek actually emailed asking me to write a poem, an obit poem that looks like this, if you could see it. They're like in shape of obituaries, to America. And I always joke that I deliver prompts and ask people to write prompts, but I never write towards them myself. So this is the only poem I've ever written towards a prompt. Obit. America died on February 14, 2018, and my dead mother doesn't know. Since her death, America has died a series of small deaths, each one less precise than the next. My tears are now shaped like hooks, but my heart is damp still. If it is lucky, it is in the middle of its beats. The unlucky dead children hold telegrams they must hand to a woman at a desk. The woman will collect their belongings in shadows. My dead mother asks each of these children if they know me, have seen me, how tall my children are now. They will tell her that they once lived in Florida, not California. She will see the child with a hole in his head. She will blow the dreams out of the hole like dust. I used to think death was a kind of anesthesia. Now I imagine long lines, my mother taking in all the children. I imagine her touching their hair, how she might tickle their knees to make them laugh. The dead hold the other half of our ticket. The dead are an image of wind, and when they comb their hair, our trees rustle.
Wow. Oh, thank you, Victoria. It still astonishes me what the art that you made in response to that. I mean, you and Jericho both incredibly, I was just glad no one was giving me the prompt. I never had to do it. And we had so many great writers who couldn't do it and who are still trying to do it and who can't because the message overwhelms the art. And, that's of course what happened to the dead man. He's silent on this subject. But yeah, it's incredible. And I think I just saw recently this was long or shortlisted for the Pulitzer or the National Book Award or something, one of the big ones. Anyway, it's a pretty incredible collection. So you're going to want to get it in addition to Dear America. But yeah, that poem just, it hollows me out. So listen, I don't know if the names John Prine, Townes Van Zandt, Greg Brown mean anything to you, but in 2 decades on the road, Jeffrey Foucault has become one of the most distinctive voices in American music. He's built an international touring career on countless miles, indelible craft, and a series of critically acclaimed albums, lauded for what the New Yorker calls stark, literate songs that are as wide open as the landscape of his native Midwest. And the Irish Times describes as quietly brilliant. Here is Jeffrey's letter to America, and here too, a light for the way forward.
name is Jeffrey Foucault, and I'm so pleased to be here with you tonight to celebrate the publication of this beautiful anthology, Dear America. And particularly pleased to be coming to you on the bill with my dear friend Chris Dombrowski. Generally speaking, I've always adhered to the idea that I wouldn't be a member of any club that would have me in it, but this is a club I can get behind. I'm a touring songwriter. I've been on the road for about 20 years, and I've played every state except Hawaii. And over the course of that time, I've had just about every feeling about America you can have. So I'm going to give you two versions. Here's a song that I wrote about America, and then a song after that, a song I wrote about hope. So this one's called Everybody's Famous. It goes like this. Everybody's famous, everybody's free, everybody's broken heart is shining like a new TV on the walls of a dark room where the world used to be. Everybody's famous, everybody's free. There's a fire in the windrows, a wolf in the corn. There's a wildness waiting for the moment to be reborn, and your life is a ticket waiting to be torn. Everybody's famous, and everything is gone. If your tongue is sleeping, curled inside your head, like a lion or a serpent, you might as well be dead. If your heart is beating, sealed inside of your ribs, it's upon that dark electric, the only love that lives. Everybody knows you. They saw your billboard in the rain. They heard your mama crying. You forgot your own real name, and she voted for your heartbreak. She smiled at your shame. Everybody's famous. They know it's all a game. And everybody's famous, and everybody's free. The kingdom of heaven is inside of me. Oh, I want to kick the lights out, 'cause I know there's something left to be. Everybody's famous, everybody's free. Everybody's famous. Alright, well here's another kind of song. This is a song about hope. And this is a song that we play just about every night on the road, and I wrote it for a dear friend of mine, but I've played it for a lot of different people. Right now I'm playing it as my own letter to America. So thanks for tuning in. This is called Hurricane Lamp. You got a heart like a hurricane. You got a heart like a hurricane. I see you shine anywhere I am. You got a heart like a hurricane. Keep your light inside. Keep your light inside. Keep your light inside. Keep your light. It's a long black night coming down on you, and it howls inside where the wind blows through. I know you feel like you're dying for anything true. You got a light and it shines in you. Keep your light inside. Keep your light inside. Keep your light inside. Keep your light. Thanks, you guys. Thanks to Derek and Simmons and Elizabeth for putting this book together. It's a beautiful book and a source of inspiration to all of us. And thanks to my buddy Chris Dombrowski. Hope we'll see you out there. Good night.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Just want to read some of the things that came in over the chat while we were listening to that. Rock and roll, go team, clap, 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 bravo, I'm in tears. What's in the travel mug, Derek? Hey, come on, no. That was wonderful. Weeping now, okay. So yeah, no more of that, Jeffrey. We got some more of this to get through here. Yeah, no, thank you. What a special gift. I think I saw maybe a Mulvey. We might have a Mulvey watching tonight, a Peter Mulvey maybe. He's another guy you need to check out. As I was listening to, I don't know if your connection was a little wonky too, but you got to go and buy the music and listen to it when it isn't wonky, if it was wonky for you, because Hurricane Lamp will get you through some tough times. I've been listening to it for several years now, and yeah, I mean, it'll help. It's good medicine. So thank you. And as I was listening to him, as I was listening to Victoria and Ana Maria and Chris, I was just something I've been thought about lately since this pandemic. It's like, little did we know that it was such a beautiful gift to be together, to be able to share a room together, to be in the same space together. And if you ever have the chance to go hear Jeffrey Foucault live, you just might levitate. How about that, Whitney? Okay, listen, it's time for our last reader of the night. Don't forget to use the Q&A feature to post any questions for consideration, or just mention how you're, except you're not going to be weeping, because this guy doesn't make people weep. Listen, David Gessner. So, you know, Dombrowski, yeah, he says, oh, still be on the river. Okay. Well, Gessner just flew in. I mean, he's late. I think he's here somewhere. Gessner, I think he just came off some lake or huge body of water or something. And then this book here is minutes old. It was just released. And this is David's latest book. He's the author of 11 books that blend a love of nature, humor, memoir, and environmentalism, including Leave It As It Is, A Journey Through Theodore Roosevelt's American Wilderness, which is, you know, got him a new great friend in Robert Redford now. I mean, what's up? I mean, I shouldn't tell you this, David. A couple of years ago, he's like, hey, listen to this voice message. And it's hey, David, this is Bob Redford here. Listen, I'm calling about your book. Oh man, it was so fun. Anyway, so that book's just released. You got to get it. And then the New York Times best-selling All the Wild That Remains, which is Edward Abbey, Wallace Stegner, and the American West, a book that I've thought about a lot lately, because one of the words that comes up a lot as he describes the West is dry, and it's getting drier. Gessner currently serves as chair of the creative writing department at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. When I posted a note on social media about this event, one of my friends, I got several responses, but you know, one of the responses I got came from my friend Sue Sampson, who posted, and she said, "You got David Gessner? Question mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark." Yeah, we got David Gessner. That's your cue, David. You're muted, amigo.
How about now?
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
You just started, classically, you just started breaking up right before I got my cue to come on. So hopefully you can hear me clearly, but I just want to thank everybody else. It was great to hear Victoria read, Ana Maria, and that was great to hear about The Long Black Night, which I'm going to talk about a little bit from Jeffrey. And Chris came off the water. I was out on Buzzards Bay a minute ago. I've been pretty much sheltering in place in North Carolina, which, you know, is where I work. I don't know if I mainly call it home. And just recently, I started a road trip with my daughter, my wife. My daughter's 17 and her best friend. And we went into kind of Virginia, and my daughter said, "Oh, this is so wonderful. I love this state." And then the Trump signs started to appear. And then we hunkered down in this cottage where there was loud dog barking and ATV. And my wife got the call about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and yelled "no" into the phone. And the girls went out for a walk where they got catcalled on the road. So they came back, and we had kind of the opposite of hope sort of night, spiraling down a little bit. And it got me, you know, I could go and just talk instead of read my piece. I'll read it because that's the rules. But basically thinking about hope and what hope really is. we paid a lot of lip service, but I think like a couple things it is temperament. I'm a person who was at the end of my rope that night and woke up the next morning. And that's the other thing it is time of day. As Thoreau liked to say, morning is the time of hope. We kind of start to reimagine and rebuild the whole thing the next day. But it is a long black night. And one of the things my daughter's friend said that evening was everybody keeps saying how 2020 it is. And they don't understand that 2020 is just the portal to things that we've been long predicting. And how do you go about a normal life? And I'm not thinking about myself. I've had my fun. I'm thinking about my daughter and her friends. How did they have normal pleasures and a normal life when the climate stuff we predicted is all here upon us? And I guess that's something we can talk about during the Q&A. But it was interesting to see them the next morning go and talk about their normal life things. They were still as oppressed by the future and by these things, but I was mildly hopeful the next morning when I heard them just like talk about boyfriends and schoolwork and that doesn't save us, I know, but it was just this moment. Anyway, I'll read mine and then we can all start chatting. It's a little strange to be reading this right now. For one thing, the book came out a month ago and I'm really sick of Teddy Roosevelt at this point. I, a while back, wrote a book called Sick of Nature, and writers all know that your next book should be called Sick of the Last Book, because you've been doing it too long. And I'm currently writing my next book, but I'll stick with this since that's the program tonight. It has been my lot over the last 3 years to be working on a book about an American president I admire while living under an American president I despise. Often during this time, I have fantasized about an actual confrontation between the two men, 26 versus 45, Roosevelt versus Trump. Okay, Derek, you promised me I could move down on this. Yes, I can. As it happened, all through his life, the president famous for shouting bully had little tolerance for them. And though Donald Trump is taller and certainly heavier than Theodore Roosevelt, he would have had his hands full with a president who boxed and studied jujitsu while in the White House. Witnessing a physical confrontation would be fun, but a mental and verbal battle would be even better. The great thinker and speaker, the author of over 40 books who read a book a night and whose mind ranged throughout history debating the non-reader, the non-speaker, the non-thinker. The match would be competitive only in terms of raw belligerence and self-confidence, but unequal in all other ways. Particularly since TR was most eloquent when spurred to outrage, and since nothing drove him to outrage like the rising tide of commercialism and crassness which was flooding the America he loved. He hated nothing more than the wealthy criminal class and predatory wealth. While Roosevelt abhorred corruption, perhaps the area where these two men are most diametrically opposed is in their attitude toward the American wilderness. Of that wilderness, Mr. Trump has said, "We can leave a little bit, but you can't destroy businesses." Mr. Roosevelt, on the other hand, felt a reverence and wonder toward the land that, despite some bullying flaws of his own, has always redeemed him for me. Perhaps his most famous words about the wilderness were, "Leave it as it is." And I like to imagine him saying those words sharply, emphatically, and confidently to our current president whenever he tries to reduce another national park. I am well aware of recent arguments that undermine the national park ideal, namely that the pristine wilderness that Theodore Roosevelt and others saved had already been inhabited by human beings for 10,000 years. There are flaws in what the writer Wallace Stegner, citing Lord Bryce, called America's best idea, flaws that recent efforts, like those of the coalition of tribes that helped create Bears Ears National Monument, are trying to correct. But we need to put those flaws in context. The total time of human inhabitation of this continent is a tiny blink compared to the millions of years that things ran, swam, flew, grew, flourished, and evolved here. there is such a thing as being a species bigot too. It was Roosevelt's genius that he understood this. For the benefit and the enjoyment of the people, says the sign above the arch at Yellowstone. But Roosevelt's secret agenda was to preserve the park, not just for the people, but for the thousands of animals and plants and lichen and fungi. Seen from a car today while stuck in a mile-long traffic jam, Yellowstone can seem a disaster. But the caricature of a park is not the park. Only 1% of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem is made up of roads. 99% is the realm of the elk, bear, wolf, and cougar, actual wild animals. That's what TR loved about Yellowstone, not the geysers, and that's what he wanted to save, and he did. I remind myself that there are 4,500 bison, 500 wolves, and 10,000 elk who aren't listening when eco-modernist scholars tell us that wilderness does not exist. Near the end of The Wilderness Warrior, Douglas Brinkley writes of Roosevelt, he saw the planet as one single biological organism pulsing with life and championed the interconnectedness of nature as his own Sermon on the Mount. As forces of globalization run amok, Roosevelt's stout resoluteness to protect our environment is a strong reminder of our national wildlife heritage, as well as an increasingly urgent call to arms. Roosevelt found that interconnectedness everywhere, including while birding on the beaches and woods near his Long Island home, but it was in the vast lands of the West, lands that, thanks in part to him, were to become protected lands, that he found something more. I mentioned Wallace Stegner, and Roosevelt believed in what Stegner called the geography of hope. That is what the Western landscape has always been for me, a born Easterner, and that is what it is for so many of us. Not a symbol of hope, but hope embodied. The geography of hope. This phrase came at the end of Stegner's Wilderness Letter of 1960. Stegner knew the story Roosevelt had spent all his life telling, and in his famous letter, he retold and articulated it as well as anyone ever has. Something will have gone out of us as a people if we ever let the remaining wilderness be destroyed, if we permit the last virgin forest to be turned into comic books and plastic cigarette cases, if we drive the few remaining members of the wild species into zoos or to extinction, if we pollute the last clear air and dirty the last clean streams and push our paved roads through the last of the silence, so that never again will Americans be free in their own country from the noise, the exhausts, the stinks of human and automotive waste. And so that never again can we have the chance to see ourselves single, separate, vertical, and individual in the world, part of the environment of trees and rocks and soil, brother to the other animals, part of the natural world, and competent to belong in it. If the West and its public lands are in fact still a geography of hope, it might be worth it to give some thought to where that hope comes from. A country as surely evolves out of its physical features as a human being out of his or her physiology, and the existence of so-called wild places has always been part of this country's DNA. Stegner knew that. People were shaped by the place they inhabited. This is not mystical, but common sense. As ideals, hope or freedom grew out of a country with a continent worth of places laid out in front of it, better places just beyond. The fact that those wild places have shrunken down to islands only argues more strongly that we must protect and expand what is left. Better a wounded wilderness than none at all, Stegner wrote. There is still a whiff of the old American exceptionalism in the Wilderness Letter, but Stegner isn't claiming that we are the only people on earth to have a deep relationship with our place. That would be absurd and jingoistic. Cultures all over the world have grown out of the land on which they lived and have beautifully expressed their love of those lands. But while Americans are not unique, it is not absurd to say that we have developed a certain sort of language, a kind of spiritualism in our attitude toward the land. It is reflected in our literature and our art. I recently spoke to a book club in Colorado made up of people who would otherwise who you would otherwise mostly regard as non-religious. And I heard their tone shift when I asked them about nature. I don't think it is an exaggeration to say that for more than a small percentage of Americans, nature is religion. It might seem antiquated and a little quaint to be focused on saving wilderness in an overheated world full of violence and racism. I don't think it is. I believe that the land we have set aside, land that we have allowed animals, plants, and trees to live, where we have allowed animals, plants, and trees to live, and with any luck evolve as they would without too much human interference, is still the greatest thing about our country. For me, the land itself is the single best reason for hope in what often seems a hopeless time. Not small and quibbling human plans and contretemps, but the land, a physical statement of our belief in the future.
Wow, thank you, David. That was beautiful and much needed. And we're getting lots of love here over the chat. Just want to say, y'all, thank you so much. We're seeing it. It's kind of pouring in. And Nick Neely said, people were just happy to hear you keep talking, by the way, David. So you didn't have to read that, but I'm glad you did because it's really good. Even though you just like stole my bed one morning and wrote it in like an hour when we were at the ASLE conference. So don't think I forgot about how you took my bedroom like that and turned it into your little writing shack. And an hour later, here's your letter to America. So and other people were saying, yeah, this is so timely right now. I want that book. I think they mean your Leave It As It Is book, because that guy who said it, he already has a Dear America book. I know that guy. So listen, before turning to the Q&A, we're almost there. I just want to announce that next in our series of the town hall readings, it's themed Real Patriotism. Thank you, Ana Maria. Real Patriotism, the Art of Activism and Protest, and which will feature readings and discussion by Sherwin Bitsui, Fenton Johnson, Amy Nezukumatatil, and Deborah Marquardt. This town hall will be moderated by the big guy himself, Terrain.org editor-in-chief, Simmons Buntin, and will take place on October 21st at 5 p.m. Pacific time and 8 p.m. Eastern time, and all times in between. You can register now through Facebook, Terrain.org, tupress.org, or dearamericabook.org. And you can also purchase, don't forget, Dear America book at 20% off using the discount code TOWNHALL, all caps, at dearamericabook.org. It's an incredible collection, as you're hearing tonight. And speaking of Dear America, I have to say one last thing. I can tell you that it makes a wonderful textbook. We've heard from a lot of people who've been using it in the classroom recently. I've been using it in the classroom, and it comes with courtesy of education editor Janine DeBase and Terrain.org, some substantial discussion, writing prompt, and multimedia resources, which you can find online at Terrain.org. Now, to the questions. There's a lot of love pouring in through the chat, but some good questions here in the Q&A. Oh, hey, this is there's several good ones. Here's one. What are the stories you're clinging to during this divisive time? Are there any? What nooks and crannies are you looking to find them? What stories are you clinging to during this divisive time? Would someone like to take that? Someone named David Gessner. Okay, yes, go ahead, David. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I hate to swing from one white male patriarchal figure to another, But as I said, I was getting a little tired of Teddy by the end. I think I pretty fully acknowledge his flaws in the book, but what I was trying to do is kind of make myself be more of an activist. I was basically saying to myself in this book, you've been writing about how much you love nature for 10 books. It's time to put up or shut up a little bit and get more out there. But then the world shut down, back in late February, early March. And I went back to an earlier figure, Mr. Thoreau, which I know all the Asleyites are very familiar with, as we're supposed to pronounce his name, Thoreau. And what I really had, that was the first book that had really influenced me. I tell a story in this essay I wrote about having my daughter, when she's 1 year old, on my shoulders, going to Walden and pointing to where the foundation was and saying, that's where the man lived who ruined Daddy's life. It was like, and he ruined it in a good way. But, so I went, right after this, I started to think more about those Thoreauvian lessons. And one is the story of learning your backyard and learning your home place. And this is the first time I've traveled 6 months later, but the story that I was telling is, I'm not just going to learn it. I'm going to memorize and go deep into my backyard. And my backyard is a creek that leads down to the beach. And I really did. I birded and spent more time in that backyard than I ever have before. And I don't think I was alone in that. I think a lot of people were doing the same thing. Those lucky enough to have the outside to get to, if they weren't in the city. So that's a story that I've focused on, is the story of learning home, basically.
Thank you, David. Victoria, can I turn it towards you? And on this note, I just want to say that one thing that was moving to me was the last words in your book. When I read it, I noticed that you said, and finally, in the acknowledgments, thank you to my mother, whom I've never properly thanked, which got me wondering if I properly thanked my parents. And hi, Dad, by the way. Hi, Dad's here tonight. Love you. So, Victoria, what do you think?
I was looking, I guess it's a related question. Someone asked about kind of like maybe how you're finding hope at this moment. And honestly, I've been leaning more into my sadness and my depression, which is not something that I've ever really done before very well in general. Like when I wrote my book, I was very sad, obviously, but I think, and then I would just kind of bounce back and just pretend that everything was fine. And so I'm very good at compartmentalizing pain and sadness and depression. And honestly, it's like just this time has been a great time for me to just admit that I don't feel well, or that I feel sad, or that people are having a hard time. And, for the first time, just sort of admitting that and saying that. So I guess leaning into those things is important to me. In terms of stories that I've been kind of clinging to, I mean, I don't know, I guess a lot of poetry, but I'm also not really reading as much as normal. And I think that's also been really nice. So it's kind of just a way to do different things at this time and just allow myself to be different. So I don't know if there are any stories that I've leaned into or I've sort of clung to. I don't feel the ability to cling to anything. So, and just allowing myself to have that sort of slippage. I don't really know. I don't think that's a good answer, but that's all I have. So.
I think it's a great answer. Thank you for that. As you were talking about leaning into depression and sadness and sort of giving yourself permission to do that. It was making me think of how, I've been trying to teach online right now, and just like, it's so hard to give myself permission to just not do as good. I mean, I just, and to just be okay with that and to be comfortable with that. It's been but it feels better that I'm coming to that now. I can feel some anxiety slipping away. So yeah, thank you. Ana Maria, can you speak to this? What's any stories that you're finding, that you're holding on to?
I sort of going off of where Victoria left off. I have found that stories aren't working for me. I'm a story person. I'm a narrative person. I do true stories, and they just aren't nourishing me. I keep thinking of the word nourishing. Like, what is going to nourish me? I am finding poetry nourishes me a lot, and I just turn to poets. Not to be uplifted, but just to go to that kind of deeper place and live in that deeper place for a while. And I noticed one of the other questions in the Q&A was about music and what music can do that's different than the written word. And I feel that same way, like sometimes just I need to live in music, whether it's really loud punk rock or whether it's, a nice soft folk song or Dancing with Sharon Jones, that there's just a part of me right now that is just so tender that nourishment needs to come from other places, and I'm just sort of letting that be the way that it is. And in a similar way, like the other question about what brings hope, I've always been a go out in the big wilderness person and take big backpack trips, and I find that short walks, that just walking outside. I know my friend Nancy is here tonight. Nancy and I were taking half day walks in Stehekin to places we hadn't been before, close to home. And I just felt that nourished me, being with a friend, being outside, very simple, and maybe staying away from stories, which is a non-answer.
Thank you. I was reading through some of these other posts here in the Q&A. In an interview a number of years ago, Barry Lopez talked about the difference he saw between optimism and hope. Which is kind of interesting to think about. How would you distinguish between the two of them? Have you thought about this? I think Victoria, you started taking us in kind of another direction like this with your comment. Any of you familiar with that? Those thoughts of Barry Lopez, or any notions about this? Optimism versus hope?
Well, when I worked with the Maidu tribe on my book called Reclaimers, they were trying to reclaim land and had been trying for a very, very long time as a non-federally recognized tribe to reclaim land. And they would have kind of, allies who would get really frustrated because they would always get thwarted by PG&E or something. And I came to recognize that they just had a whole different time frame or sense of hope. Like it was just what they did. That was just the right thing to do. And they just were stalwart about it in a way that now when I think of hope, I think of just a really strong stance, just holding your ground, rather than assuming there's going to be a good outcome, because there may not be, but you hold your ground. So.
And I can build on that a little, where just from writing is my work. And I always loved the Isaac Dinesen quote, write a little every day without hope or despair. The flight of hope leads to the crashing down. I mean, my book centers around Bears Ears, and the elation over Obama's declaration of it, in December 2016 was followed by not 10 months later, the undeclaration by Trump. But it's a little writing's kind of a metaphor for a lot of things for me, because that's my work. So I keep doing it. And you guys said about the stories not gripping you. I find that that's my solace right now, is stories, versus I'm in the midst of publishing a book. And that seems so massively superficial right now. And it's also during a pandemic, and, waving around and going, look at me, and posting it on social media. It's just like, oh my God, I'm starting to hate myself. I'd much rather be doing something that gives me real satisfaction, like creating. So I guess that wasn't much of an answer, but it's to say, do your work, do the work that you're here to do, and certainly you get your up and downs, but you do it without hope or despair to some degree.
Thank you. So we have, oh, thank you. I really appreciate the notion that hope is holding our ground or doing our work. Yeah, me too. I don't, I just want to say that one of the things that's hopeful for me here is we got to see all your names, participants, as you joined, and it just feels like a big, great kind of family reunion in a sense. There's a lot of familiar names here, and we just want to thank you so much for joining us. Allison says hi, David. Victoria, Maya, Zeller was really loved hearing you read your poem. Ana Maria, you have too many fans on here to pick out one, so I can't do that. Anyway, yeah, we're 16 minutes over time, so we should probably end this, even though I don't want to. I want to keep it going because this is kind of the thing that's been helping me is connecting with other people during this time and trying to be more conscious about those connections. So yeah, David, Victoria, Ana Maria, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And yeah, here we go, right? November and beyond. Yeah. Okay, so I think with that, everybody, we just want to kind of give you our hug here, or maybe David, you can show us the top of your forehead again. I love that shot. Yeah. Okay.
There's not much there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Derek. That was lovely. Yep. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.